Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Genova Burns, Terra CRG, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Eastern Union Funding, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Hersha Hospitality, Hodges Ward Elliott, Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Ethics in business? What is it? I've heard the term. There are courses given today on this topic. So I wanted to bring together a group of people, or should I say my executive producer, Mr. Larry Zicklin, has brought together a couple of friends to talk about ethics in business and topics about that. As I said, my guests, they include Larry Zicklin, clinical professor at the Stern School of Business of NYU and also at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. His fellow colleague, Karen Brenner, who is at the Stern School of Business. A co-founder of the law firm of Schulte, Roth & Zabel and head of the hedge fund practice, Paul Roth. And last but not least, an education consultant, Rosemary Matheson, who's with the Paxson and Ellis, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what is ethics? Could you define ethics, or who's going to take that role of defining ethics?
I think Karen ought to take it. She's at the law school and at the Stern School.
Well, ethics in business is really the standard habits of behavior of a business. And ethics is our pattern of behavior, how we determine what we ought to do, what is right to do. And I think companies that actually think deeply about ethics in business have an opportunity to inspire their workforce to do what is good and what is right. And that really brings a lot more value and meaning to individuals' role in a corporation.
But, I failed to say that Paul is also with Larry at Wharton.
And at NYU.
And NYU. But here's the question. You represent all these hedge funds who have this, people talk about hedge funds not being that ethical. And there's activism. There's activisms by, you hear Carl Icahn, you hear other people over there. How is there ethics in hedge funds?
Well, definitely are ethics in hedge funds. I mean, not every hedge fund is ethical, but most are.
Oh, I'm happy.
Most are.
Wait. You've said not every hedge fund is ethical.
Not every businessman is ethical.
Not every of a TV show was ethical.
Not exactly. Not
oh,
every,
that was a punch.
Oh, okay.
So, but by and large, we find that they're quite ethical. And most organizations, in my experience, take their ethics from the senior level of the organization. And I think it's very important because everybody else is doing it, is not an ethical standard.
So what happened to the people at MCI, and what happened to the guy who was running the company, Kozlowski or what?
Kozlowski.
Kozlowski. These were companies that were successful, and all the people who went away with these people. Where was the ethics? Where were the board of directors? Where were the investors? Where were the investment bankers on this?
Where were the incentives?
Incentives? We were talking that nonprofits, shouldn't, they shouldn't be earning profits because they're a question of incentives. We were talking about hospitals.
I would say that, first of all, I don't know Kozlowski, but I knew he built Tyco into a very, very successful company. And Larry and I often talk at class, like when we teach, is that frequently people develop habits over time. And I don't think, my guess would be, Kozlowski was not a guy who lavished himself
He
with...
was an accountant when he started.
Right.
He changed his role, and he continued with the company and built a very good company.
But that's not the path I think Paul's talking about. Paul's talking about a path of somebody who doesn't start out dishonest. They start to make compromises along the way, and they make more and more compromises until at some point when they're the CEO, they make compromises
Wait a second.
that are wholly unrealistic.
Besides the individual, you were saying in the green room, we were talking about insurance companies who haven't paid claims to Holocaust survivors.
Right.
And then we're talking about college basketball and college football players who the universities survive on the amount of money that Nike, Under Armour, and all the other people pay. So shouldn't they get paid? I mean, they work like animals this past weekend on March Madness, and these people don't get paid. They go to college. But in reality, aren't they the minor leagues?
I would agree they are semi-pros. They're in college, many of them, not all of them, many of them for one reason only, and that is to try and get into the professional leagues, and a bargain is struck. The colleges will give them football scholarships or basketball scholarships for a year or two until they can find their way out, the good ones, and get into the pros, and they work for nothing. And I think that's a Faustian bargain. I think it's a mistake. I've talked to Paul about this. I think they should be paid because they're employees. They're employees of the college working 40, 50-hour weeks.
I mean, there was
At
a
their
The question
professional
really is
football.
whether they are being paid with the fellowships and the scholarships that they're getting and an opportunity to develop a career path to huge amounts of money that they would never have under other circumstances.
getting a scholarship
So the
to
issue
prep
is, to
school.
me, is it adequate pay? Is it pay that's reasonable relative to the circumstances that they are, the dangers that they may be undertaking? But, in some ways, they're getting paid.
They are getting paid.
But they're getting paid an improper wage.
Correct.
You don't get $40,000, which is, let's say, the value of a scholarship, when you're working at a $140,000 job, which is what you should be paid.
And also, let's also look at the situation that if you're a football player, the possibility of concussion and brain injuries, okay? The amount of money, the scholarship may be something, but now look at the extra. You're permanently disabled, okay? Shortness of your life.
Does it belong in a university?
After all, in a university, the coach is getting paid $5 or $6 million. The assistant coach is getting $1.5 million. Ohio State signs an agreement with Nike for $252 million over 14 years, and it's all on the backs of the players.
Yeah, but look at the pay disparity in corporate America. Pay disparities exist. I mean, the issue that I thought you were talking about is, are they getting paid? As I said, we can argue or discuss whether they're getting paid adequately, whether the risks that they are undertaking are adequately disclosed. I don't know.
But what about the concept that we discussed about the insurance companies who said, they died in the Holocaust. It was 40 years ago. I don't want to pay. What happened?
Well, the insurance companies it's a very interesting situation, as we all talked about. They have a policy that they issue to you. And the policy says the way in which you get paid is your beneficiary gets paid when he presents or she presents the death certificate of the insured. Now, what we find is that in many circumstances, not numerically huge, but in dollar amounts, it's very, very significant. There's nobody who knows when the insured dies that the insured had a life insurance policy.
Because the beneficiary was never notified by the insured that he or she was a beneficiary.
Is there also a statute of limitations?
I don't believe that there is.
But the money will be escheated after a while to the state.
Right.
I mean, what happens and what's sort of...
So wait, if it's escheated to the state, then doesn't the state have the obligation to make the payment?
The state does, yes, if the beneficiary ever finds out about it. I mean, it's a very strange situation. What happens is the same insurance companies write policies where they pay you during your lifetime, called annuities. There it's to their advantage to find out if you're dead. So what do? They check the Social Security rolls to see if you're alive or dead.
Can I say something? Isn't that the way the Social Security system operates?
I don't know the answer
Well,
to that.
I mean,
there was
wha-
recently some concern that they don't operate all that well, and they're
No, but
making
isn't-
strides to improve
okay,
how they function.
No, but all
in
I'm
essence,
saying
it's a
is
similar-
when
Because
it's
they've
the
had the
insurance
reverse
company's
problem.
benefit to check because they don't have to pay out when they find out you're dead, that they check. When it's to their detriment, historically, because if they don't know you're dead, they can continue to hold the cash value of the policy.
And when
They
are they
don't pay it out.
When are they obligated to give it to the state?
It's a certain number of years after, in some cases, depending on the state, the date of death. Other cases, the date of notification.
It may be a function of state law, and what's happened
is.
over time is the states, because of this relatively low percentage incidence of occurrence, but as Paul says, high dollar value potentially, many larger insurance companies have decided voluntarily to check the rosters and make payments, but smaller insurance companies where it's economically less attractive, if you will, because it's more expensive, the cost to identify potentially a deceased party is greater relative to the value of the premium. Some of the smaller insurance companies have chosen not to, but chosen to just honor their state laws. Not all states require it. But this is an example, and I think a common thread of all this, whether it's the Tyco situation or others, is, or even in sports and in the universities, is just the evolution of practices. At a certain level, it becomes a modest issue or not a concern. And at another degree, it becomes a much greater concern.
What happens, the subject of lobbyists? I mean, lobbyists, ethics in business. I mean, you know, when I started teaching medical and dental schools many years ago, somebody taught me a great story. And it was the person of saying, the patient wanted to know, I want an itemized bill of the $2,500. And the teacher who taught me this, who told this when I was teaching, he said there was $200 for the operating room, $200 for the recovery room, and $2,100 for knowing where to cut. So in the same manner of saying knowing where to cut, isn't that what a lobbyist does?
No, a lobbyist represents his principal. Principal pays his or her salary. Lobbyist represents, to the best of it or our ability, the interest of the principal. That's the function.
I keep going back to the same question, which is why do people do what they do? The people who are paying the lobbyist think that it is worth their while to try to have someone, a professional, influencing.
Sometimes I agree. I will agree with you, but sometimes you are suggested to use a lobbyist because they believe that they're going to be helpful to you.
Suggested by whom?
They could be suggested by somebody within a corporation or within a government entity or something, that it would be worthwhile that these are the best people to utilize to help us get this taken care of.
But are you talking about a legitimate recommendation of expertise, or are you talking about a payoff?
No, you know what? I'm not the one I'm just posing the question. But I do remember a number of years ago there was a question about Al D'Amato and a phone call. It was like where to cut. And he got a $50,000 fee for introducing him the right person, okay? Is that questionably correct? I'm not here to make any judgment. I'm not playing,
We
judge
all
and
get
jury.
paid for expertise.
Okay, that's great. I agree with you. And if you know where to cut, and if you're able to do the job, people go to Paul because he's an expert. They are known as the top
Right.
firm in the hedge fund business, okay? If you want the best counsel and you want to understand activism and other things, you go to Schulte Roth. That's their specialty, okay?
But Michael, you've intimated at the beginning that there's something nefarious about activism. And I would disagree with that completely. I would argue there are certain companies that need activists because they've got to be shaken up, because they're poorly managed, and somebody's got to come in and help them.
You know something? I think you're right on point.
To talk about activism in a single brush is really difficult because, as Larry says, there may be companies who could benefit by outside perspectives about how to improve their operating performance. But Apple, for example, has done a pretty good job on their operating performance, and they could be subject to activist pressure. And there are many examples of companies who have done phenomenally
were.
well.
They were.
Yeah, they were subject
They
to
were
activists.
subject to it.
I mean,
And-
They had
and-
$130 billion worth of cash, and people
Right.
were saying,
Too much.
even Apple,
it back.
you don't need that much money.
Even-
and
and-
they
and-
did something about it.
They did. Now, whether that's a good thing, the right thing, different people could disagree about where to draw the line and what is appropriate. And over what period of time different groups want to see results. I think part of the concern about activism is that they want to see results over what may be considered a relatively shorter period of time. And they're pressing for changes in corporations that have short-term financial benefits, and the longer-term consequences when, for example, capital markets may not be as accessible as they are today, or other conditions changed, could that leave a company in a more vulnerable position?
But
So
that's
it's not a single
legitimate-
brush.
That's a legitimate difference of viewpoint and
Yes.
a legitimate difference of purpose. That one isn't right, one isn't wrong.
Right.
How many years are courses in ethics around? I mean, or required?
I started to teach in 1989
So why did you start teaching this in 1989?
because I didn't think about it in 1984.
Very good point. But in 1989, you were at a very fine company. And when did you start teaching? In 84?
89,
In 89.
first time I ever taught. I suggested it to all the colleges in New York City, but only NYU answered my letter.
It's been a requirement at NYU for a long period of time, and it's an excellent opportunity. Law students take a professional responsibility course. It's required for law students. But at NYU, where Larry's taught for decades,
Not that many decades.
and very highly regarded, appropriately so, it's really a great opportunity for students to better understand the norms of behavior in corporations and the implications of those norms on who they are as a professional, how they pursue their professional
You have
life.
a course that I was reading about. It's broken to a couple of different modules.
I have several courses, but the ethics course
The
is
ethics course I was told.
It's an ethical and legal challenges of the modern corporation, and it is in part a professional responsibility course. So it asks the students to consider their personal values and their professional roles. It looks at the corporation as an institution, and it looks at the societal implications. So it really looks at the act through three lenses: the individual and the professional role, the institutional and societal. Because as individuals functioning within corporate entities, we are also citizens at the same time. And we, I think, like to think that what we're doing not only furthers our own values and the corporate mission, but also enhances society.
I think that's true about Kozlowski, what we were saying before. He didn't start out, in all likelihood, wanting
No,
end
he
up
was
in
a
prison.
hard-working accountant, okay, who grew a company, and they were a very successful company. He became a little greed.
Well-
It's like the Michael Douglas movie of, Wall Street a number of years ago. Greed is good as that was the approach, okay? And then, The Wolf of Wall Street. There are different people, who start out in different manners, okay?
As dramatically satisfying as that may be, I think the reality is generally a little more complicated, which is that people proceed in their lives one step at a time.
But prior to this show, we were talking about investment banking, that people start 20 hours a day, the first role, okay? And there's a corporate culture who has an ethical idea, okay? And I think, isn't that true? Is corporate culture in the hedge funds, corporate culture in companies?
Corporate cultures are made up of people, of individuals.
Well, Paul said
Yes.
earlier on, this phrase we use, tone at the top, it really comes from CEOs and higher level executives. Whatever the culture of that firm is comes right down from the top. And the employees know what the culture is. They see it, they feel it, they taste
Do
it.
you believe that
Mike-
Valiant had the corporate culture of raising their price
Absolutely.
to such a...
What's his name, Shrekley?
No, Valiant. Shrecky is
the other one.
Is touring.
Is touring.
Turing. Yeah.
Pearson, I guess.
So
Pearson.
we had this discussion. Is it morally correct to raise the price by 8,800 times for perhaps a life-saving drug? Because you brought it up.
Well, we have a system where CEOs are supposed to create value. That's how they're judged. They're supposed to maximize value. There are times when you fall over the edge. Obviously, Valiant fell over the edge. But that's where good judgment comes into being. And some of the things we teach in our various courses is good judgment. You have to know how far to go, but don't go any farther.
Let's get off the drugs. Let's look at this analysis that recently
I
happened.
resent the fact you think I'm on drugs.
No. I'm talking about this healthcare. The 3 leading hospital systems in New York, they analyzed the price of an MRI, the same treatment, and the price differential, and they're nonprofits. Let's remember, they're nonprofit organizations.
Wait a minute. You've got to be very careful about the word nonprofit. I understand what nonprofit means, but when you add to your endowment, when you pay CEOs a lot of money or boards a lot of money, the word nonprofit can be debated, I think.
It just means their sources of capital are different.
Yeah.
They're subject to different rules, different taxes, et cetera. But
It just means
but
they call
But in the
profit.
state
They'll
of
have
New
to
Jersey,
generate-
they're trying to say that hospitals in New Jersey who are nonprofits should be paying real estate taxes.
I thought you were talking about the differences that people charge.
I am. I'm talking about different
I mean,
charges.
I find that without knowing each institution, I think that's a very hard question to answer what's appropriate, because you charge, for example, we'll charge for our expertise, and it will not, and for what we do, it may be more than what somebody else will charge.
But it relates
also-
to my comment of the patient saying knowing where to cut. What you could possibly do within a period of time is different than in a different law firm who
it's
doesn't
very
specialize
direct. In
in.
the case of a law firm, the knowing where to cut analogy and going to a top law firm, that's a decision between the client and the attorney. In the case of medicine, there are layers of intermediaries, and frankly, what they charge may not be anywhere related to what they get paid.
Yes, because what they
So
charge.
that's a whole
okay,
other
what
system.
they charge. I mean, there are people who work in hospitals who are major people who negotiate fees. Okay, that's the way.
Right.
And many doctors try not to accept, because the Medicare fee is so different than the insurance company fee, and there are different things. I mean, but the real question is, how do you put to the students this value system that they should understand about ethics?
Well, one of the things we talk about in our class is that you want to ensure the success of the venture over the long term. So each day as you make decisions, you have to have the long term in the back of your mind and say to yourself, does this contribute or not contribute to my success, my institution's success, and my personal
okay,
success
wait.
in the long run?
Two sides. the institution's success and the personal success.
And societal. I know that
And
if society doesn't view the practices of a given firm to be ethically defensible, then that firm's business model is going to come into jeopardy. So it may not be a question of the law. It may be a question of society's judgment that that practice isn't viable, isn't ethical, and isn't sustainable. Even Milton Friedman, in his socially responsible piece in 1970 in the New York Times, talked about has to be consistent with ethical practice. So as a society, we can make very quick judgments about ethical practice because technology's facilitated our knowing about many different elements of a business operations all around the globe instantaneously.
And that's a big change.
And that's a big change. So it's another kind of reality that corporations are subject to. And that's why, as Larry talks about the long term, is it defensible? Is it defensible for me as an individual? Is it defensible and in the interest of the corporation over the long term? And what does that look like from a societal standpoint?
Paul and I always tell our students in advance that we can tell you the ethical challenges you will face. It'll be different than the challenges we faced. But we can sensitize you. We can get the
Exactly
hairs on
right.
the back of your neck going up when you're about to get into that position.
Right.
And that's our function.
Right.
And what's your function when you do educational?
My function is to remind them that most people operate on the basis of how they're being paid. Don't ask someone to do A, but reward him or her for doing B. And the second thing is what Karen was just talking about. Would you want to see what you've just done on the front page of the New York Times? It might be defensible personally, it might be defensible on the basis of how your company is paying you, but is it defensible on a societal level?
Your big comment is it's not only the New York Times today with the internet.
It's the
the
social
world,
media.
It's the social media. And what social media has created, pro or con, is enormous.
Massive reputational risk.
There
Or
was a
opportunity.
banker.
Or opportunity.
It's also
Exactly.
not so easy to project what will be taken as what's the right thing in social media as it is to project what will be the right thing on the front page of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
To talk about this topic, you cannot accomplish this in 26 and a half minutes. So I hope that later in the season or maybe in the future, we can all meet together and continue the discussion with illustrations and specific cases and matters with regard to this. So people can get a better idea about ethics in business and how people are being trained. The next generation is being trained on the ethics. And I'd like to thank my producer, executive producer, Mr. Larry, Karen,
Thank you so much.
Paul, and Rosemary, and I'll see you next week.